welcome to New Teacher Big Impact, the podcast. I am terrible teacher turned two-time teacher of the year, Daryl Williams Jr. And today, are schools responsible for students that don't go to school? Well, a new lawsuit says yes. And then your at-home hair dye kit will tell you when it's time to rinse it out and move on. But how do you know when it's time to move on to a new lesson objective? I'll show you what to look out for. And I'll answer a question submitted by a listener that asks, how do you be the teacher that students like, but also the teacher that students listen to? We'll cover all that and more in this episode of New Teacher Big Impact. Impact starts now. We are getting started with the warning bell, which is the segment where I share a news article that is something that's going on in the world of education that you need to be warned about. And today, again, are schools responsible for students who avoid school? A new lawsuit says yes, so we'll dive right into that. But let me first remind you about impact. That impact, again, listen, if Netflix and Facebook had a baby, that would be impact. Well, if Netflix and Facebook had a baby that was centered around education, that would be impact, because you can stream content, you can see courses, you can see trainings and workshops, all surrounded around what it takes to become an effective teacher, while also being in a community group where you can ask questions of other peers, you can find like-minded individuals, you can talk to people who have gone through similar situations, all on one platform, and that platform is called Impact. We built that just for you to make sure that you become the teacher you've always wanted to be and make the impact you've always wanted to make, and so that we can support you on your journey to get there. Impact is a real solid solution for your professional development needs, and you can get started today by watching a free course on classroom management called Classroom Management Made Simple. We're linking it in the description below, impactcourses.com, to get started today. Now, this warning bell was super interesting to me because a lawsuit is from parents, and they're coming from the New York Public City School District, which I actually used to once be a part of when I was growing up. I went to PS 16, I went to IS 61, and then I went to Manhattan for high school, and then here I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'm a product of New York City Public Schools, and some parents are suing New York City Public Schools because they're saying that the reason why the children are avoiding school is because the public schools don't do enough to care for their students with disabilities, and the students don't want to go to school. So as you know, students attendance is required. And if you're missing more than a certain amount of days, then you get flagged for truancy, and parents are being brought to court and things like that because you're not sending your kids to school. Well, these parents are saying it's not our fault that we're not sending the kids to school. The students don't want to go because they don't feel supported in your school building. So what the schools are calling chronic absenteeism, the parents are calling school avoidance. They're saying they just don't want to go to school because they don't feel supported there. They're saying that their students with disabilities don't have the resources, don't have the access that they need to feel supported and feel like a part of the school community. So they're avoiding going to school. But now the parents are being penalized because they're being labeled as chronically absent. I think it's an interesting situation to be in. I think it's an interesting dynamic. Now, the disabilities of the students that are included in the lawsuit are agoraphobia and depression, ADHD, social anxiety, and autism. And agoraphobia, if I'm not mistaken, is the fear of like leaving the house or going outside, right? So these schools are considering the students to be chronically absent because they're missing more than 10 days or more than 10% of the school year. They're missing so much time. And parents are saying, listen, in the mornings, I'm chasing them around the house and they're screaming, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And it's, as a parent, it's tough for me to tackle them and put them on the bus, right? So it's hard. They really don't want to go into the schools. And it's interesting because a claim was made that 46% of students with disabilities are chronically absent. And then the parents are saying, with numbers like this, 46% of students with disability are chronically absent, then that's not a parent issue, that's a school systemic issue. So that's why they're suing the school and saying, if your schools were doing something different, then maybe our students would want to be there. So they also claim that the remedies that the schools are giving for some of the behaviors that the students are exhibiting are out of school type remedies, solutions. So they're saying like, you're telling my student, or you're telling me as a parent that maybe it'll be better if you homeschool them, right? They're saying maybe it'll be better if they work virtually, or if they go to a remote learning school, or if they leave half of the day, they spend half the day in school, half the day at home. So you're giving me solutions that are telling me to take my student out of school, but then you're penalizing me for the fact that my students has low attendance. So the fact that you're suggesting that my students would do better in another environment is suggesting that your environment is not equipped for my student, which is proof that my student doesn't feel safe in your school and doesn't feel supported in your school. So why should they have to go? So this is the argument that the parents are having, and the schools are saying, no, they still need to be in school because that's the law, they need to be here. And I think it's interesting because even as an assistant principal, one of the things that they just said struck a chord with me, because even as an assistant principal, I can remember we had 3 specific examples of challenging students, and the solution that we did, one of them we put on half day, so they would come for the morning and then they would leave after lunch, because that's when things would go haywire after lunch. So we said take them home. We had another student that, which was legal, obviously. I'm not trying to say we did some illegal stuff. It was legal because he spent more than 50% of the school day at the school. Then we had another student that we just switched to virtual learning because he was a lot to manage in the classroom, and the parents consented. So we switched to virtual learning. He did his virtual learning for the whole year. He just came in for testing, and then we had some students that we asked to reassign. And so we just were not equipped as a public school. We're just not equipped. They needed a ABA therapist, or they needed a one-on-one, and we just didn't have the resources to provide that. So we recommended that they go to a specialized, I don't want to say institution, but a specialized place where they would have more support. So from our perspective, as a school administrator, I was like, yeah, I'm keeping the students in my building safe. I'm keeping the teachers safe. I'm helping them not be overwhelmed by all the things that they have to deal with. I already have 31 kids in the class, and I have one kid in the class that literally can't sit down, and it's not their fault. It's just a form of their disability. And we're saying, well, maybe it would be better if they were in an alternate environment that had more support for those types of behaviors. And the parents are saying the public school system should have support for those types of behaviors. So if I don't send my kid to school, I shouldn't be penalized. So it's definitely messy. It's definitely a huge mess. I'm interested to see how this is going to play out in the court system, but I think that they might be onto something, because here's the thing that I thought of. If the school is not set up for your child to succeed, how can we penalize the child for not wanting to be there? And I think that is a valid question. If schools are not set up for our children to succeed, how can we now penalize the child for not wanting to be there? If they're coming into an environment where they have severe ADHD and they literally can't sit down, and the teacher's like, sit down or you have a consequence, and they're like, I literally can't. I can definitely see that anxiety from the student's perspective, where it's saying, I don't even want to be in this situation. I don't want to be in that environment. I don't want to go to school. But now if I stay home, I'm getting in trouble. So that's super interesting, but I'll try to follow this story for you guys and see where it goes from here. But what does it mean for us right now as educators? I know that my biggest takeaway was we are going to be blamed for everything. As educators, we are blamed for everything. So do the best that you can and don't take it personally. So we're being blamed by these parents for not creating an environment that is conducive for their students with disabilities. And some of us are saying, listen, I'm trying the best I can. Again, I have 31 students in the class. There's 9 IEPs. Like, this student is dealing with agoraphobia, but that student's dealing with depression. That has social anxiety. This student has ADHD. This student just wants to learn. This student is gifted and talented and ready to move on, but because he's bored, he's doing things. Like, there's so many different behaviors we have in class, and parents are looking to teachers to make sure that we can manage all of these and know what to do for each individual specific child, and it's tough. So for the teacher, my message to you is, listen, just do the absolute best you can, as long as you keep students first. Good teachers are going to teach subjects. Great teachers teach students. Teach students first. Focus on the best that you can be for students. And as long as you're showing up as your best self, nobody can ask for more than that. And don't take things personally. Parents just want what's best for their child, and you just happen to be the person that's on the other end of it. That's how I look at it. Sometimes they're not coming directly for you. Sometimes they're coming for the system, but you're the one that has to hear it, right? So understand that if you are doing the best that you can, that is all that you can do. Of course, you can learn more skills, you can learn more techniques, you can master some more principles, you can become better. But if you're doing the best that you can at any given moment, that's all anybody can ask for. And when parents complain or sue or have lawsuits and things like that, don't take it personally. Again, they just want what's best for their child, just like you want what's best for their child. And one of the things that we both want that was best for our children and students is that they actually receive and retain the information that you present to them, which is why for the last couple of podcast episodes, we've been doing the Teacher Toolbox deep dive on properly planned effective lessons. And today that is the same. We're diving into part 3 of properly planned effective lessons, where we're going to figure out how do we decide when it's time to introduce a new objective, or how do we know if students are getting the information that we learned. So that is today the next segment on Teacher Toolbox, which is coming to you right after this.
Never underestimate your teaching. There's 1% that sets you apart from everybody else. And that 1% is how you're gonna make your impact.
He was exciting, funny. He is just real.
This was like monumental.
If you view your 1% as if it's a deficiency, you'll operate as if it is. But if you view your 1% as if it's your amazing, you'll operate with confidence. And I need some more people as we step into this next school year to walk confidently knowing that your differences are not your deficiencies. Your differences are not your drawbacks. Your differences are not your downfalls. But when you let your differences live, that's when you can make a difference in students' lives. I can't wait to see these teachers enact their 1% amazing and make the difference that only they can. If you would like for your school district to be empowered as well, you can click the link down below and our team will reach out to you.
It's time for the Teacher Toolbox, and as mentioned, we are diving in again to properly planned effective lessons. And for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the foundation of proper lesson planning, which is the standards. You should know that by now. It's standards. The curriculum is a resource. Standards are the foundation. But from those standards, you create objectives, and each lesson is built on an objective. Now, objectives could be bland, could be dry, could be boring, but you can add your own little razzle dazzle to bring the lessons to life, to make sure that students are receiving, retaining that information that then leads to a transformation. But how do you know whether or not the information that you are giving to students is actually being received, is actually being retained? How do you know that it's leading to a transformation? That's what we're going to talk about today. And again, all of this is taken from the course, Properly Planned Effective Lessons, that is inside of Impact. So if you can't wait, there are 4 more lessons. If you can't wait for the 4 more lessons, you can go access the full course right here, right now. It's already live inside of Impact by going to impactcourses.com or using the link in the description or in the show notes down below. So we're talking about how to actually know if students are getting that information. And the way I like to put it is blunt, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's blunt, but watch this. If they didn't learn it, you didn't teach it. Pause for dramatic effect. If they didn't learn it, you didn't teach it. You may have said it, you may have spoken it, you may have talked about it, but you didn't teach it if they didn't learn it. The definition of to teach something means that you give somebody information that they receive and understand in a way that they can then implement the teachings or implement the content that you taught on their own. And if they cannot do that, it was not learned. If it was not learned, that means it was not taught. Right? It was said, it was spoken, but it was not taught. It's not taught until it is learned. So that being said, make sure that we are understanding that students actually learned the thing. And the way that we can do that is by implementing consistent check-ins or consistent assessments. One of the things that we don't want to do is over-assess students, right? That's definitely something that has been talked about a lot. We don't want to give students tests on tests on tests on tests on tests. We want to make sure that we are assessing, though, to see if students got it. That's why there's a difference between formative assessments and summative assessments. Formative assessments are going to happen frequently, they're going to happen often, and they don't always have to be anxiety-inducing. The purpose of formative assessments is to make sure that the objective that is being taught is being understood. So formative assessments, those are going to be some of your check-ins. It could be do nows and exit tickets. It's going to be reflection questions. It's going to be even worksheets. It's going to be problems. It's going to be Kahoots, quizzes. Like, it's going to be a whole bunch of different ways to check throughout the lesson to see if students are on track to mastering the objective. A summative assessment, those are going to be your traditional tests, your benchmark tests, your unit tests. Like, that's going to be a summative assessment where we're putting everything all together. And what we're talking about today is, again, in properly planning effective lessons, is to make sure that you are also properly planning how you are going to assess what students know. And that is going to be through these assessments. So with your formative assessments, here you go. Here's the tip. Formative assessments need to be done. I always like to use this. How often should we test? How often should we assess? How often? Watch this. As frequently as you need to, but as infrequently as possible. As frequently as you need to be able to assess student learning, but as infrequently as possible as to not over assess students. We shouldn't be giving assessments just to assess, whether it's formative or summative. We shouldn't be giving assessment tests just to get a grade. We shouldn't be giving tests just to say we did it. We shouldn't give an exit ticket to quiet the class, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, they should be purposeful. And in purposeful, I mean that the formative assessments that you use, again, formative assessments are going to be your reflection questions, your exit tickets, your do nows, even a short quiz. It could be a poll, a Google form, a Kahoot, quizzes, Bookit, like things that are going to directly assess the objective that is being taught and give you data to determine what students know and what students need. Anything that does that is a formative assessment. Okay? It could even be cold calling on random students in the class, or it could even be asking a singular question and walking around and seeing what students wrote down as the answer. Like, we are seeing what in real time, what is it that students know and what is it that students still need. That is a formative assessment. And in giving the formative assessments, when we're planning these effective lessons, we are planning when we are going to do the formative assessment and also what is going to be on the assessment. Because formative assessments need to directly align to the objective. It doesn't make sense if I'm assessing them on something that I'm not teaching them. Okay? Now, with a summative assessment, remember summative assessments, yeah, we want to have, all the content on there. Sometimes you have a benchmark assessment. We're trying to diagnose what students know, what students need. Sometimes it's a diagnostic where we're giving them information they don't know. When I'm talking about a formative assessment, I'm saying I'm directly looking at the objective of this lesson, and I'm seeing these are the things students need to do in order to prove that they've mastered this objective. Let me see their progress towards understanding these things. That's what a formative assessment is. And formative assessments, again, should be done as frequently as you need to make sure that you can get a good gauge on what students already know, but as infrequently as possible so that we're not over-assessing students. But and another gauge is, you wanted to do it as frequently as you can give timely feedback. Oh, maybe I should have just started with that. Maybe I should have just left that there. Formative assessments should be given as, well, not as frequently as, but don't give formative assessments more frequently than you can give timely feedback. Because one of the main purposes of formative assessments is to understand what that feedback says. Not just for you as the teacher, but also for the students. So students should be able to gauge their learning on the objective based on how they perform on the formative assessment. So when you're giving them the exit ticket, when you're giving them the do now, when you're giving them the reflection question, they should know very quickly what the correct answer is and see the gap from what their answer was to what the correct answer is. All right, or if they got it right, they should be able to have that confidence that, boom, I'm on track. But you as a teacher should also be able to, in real time or very close to in real time, be able to see what students know so that you can make adjustments as quickly as possible. That's the purpose of formative assessments. So again, let's take it back out because I don't want to get too into the weeds here. We're talking about properly planning effective lessons. What components need to go into every lesson plan to make sure that you are planning effective lessons? One of those things is formative assessments. How are you assessing to determine whether students are on track to matching that objective? That needs to happen in every single lesson, right? The reason why is because now that you understand this, you can then determine how to move on into the next lesson, right? And let me just say this. I'm not going to give you a percentage. I've been into some situations where they said if 50% of students understand or master this exit ticket, then that means you're ready for the next lesson. I'm not going to give you those parameters. I'm going to let you create those parameters for yourself in your classroom, depending on your students, but I'll give you this principle. Ready to move on to the next lesson does not mean that students are have 100% mastered this objective. Ready means that the next objective is within fingertip reach. Okay? So you should already know what your objectives are. You know what the next objective upcoming is. Students are ready to move on from this objective into the next objective when that objective is within fingertip reach. Fingertip reach is what I like to describe as something that you can reach within your fingertips. I don't know why I thought that was about to be deeper than I thought, but I'm pretty sure you know what I mean when I say fingertip reach. If it is too far for them to reach with their fingertips, they're going to be overwhelmed and not even going to try. It's not going to be an effective transition because there's too big of a gap. They're not going to be able to jump from this lesson to that lesson if it is too far out of their reach. But something that's within their, and they don't also have to be super close where it is like right here in their lap. It needs to be something that is far enough for them to still have to stretch, but within reach for them to know that I can stretch and make this. They need to have that confidence that say, I can stretch and reach this thing if I stretch. So whatever that percentage looks like for you in your class, you can come up with that. But I told you I'm going to tell you what to look for. That's what to look for. When the next objective is within fingertip reach, that's when it's time to move on to the new objective. And the only way that you're going to know that is through consistent or as frequent as needed formative assessments. And then, of course, you have your summative assessment there at the end of the unit, at the end of the week, whatever, however you decide to kind of do that. But plan those as well. But know that the summative assessment is kind of putting everything all together. Okay? So in understanding that, it is very important to know that when it's within fingertip reach, that's when you're moving on to the next lesson, and that we are in properly planned, effective lessons, that you are planning ahead of time what those objectives are, what those formative assessments are based on what that objective is, right? And this is not something that you necessarily need to do alone. It is super important to make sure that all stakeholders are involved, including parents, which is why for the new teacher quick tip of the week, we're going to talk about how to consistently engage parents to increase student engagement in your classroom right after this.
Good teachers teach subjects, but great teachers teach students. Not only is that something that I truly believe and something I love saying, but it's something that I also love wearing on my shirt, and now you can too, because the Pursuit of Excellence shop is open. DarylWilliamsJr.shop. The link is in the show notes and in the description down below, where you'll find designs just like this and all of our other popular sayings, such as, I'm smarter than I think, I'm braver than I seem, I'm stronger than I feel, and I can do hard things, or everything is figure outable, right? Or the former terrible teacher, or new teacher, big impact. All the things that you'll see, whether it's white, it's blue, it's black, so many different options, t-shirts, hoodies, all the things that you look for, where you can show people your support for how much you truly care for and love students, and as you're becoming the teacher you've always wanted to be. Click the link below or in the description and show notes to go to the store and find your design.
We're here with the new teacher quick tip of the week, and this quick tip is about how to make sure, well, this segment, let me just say that this segment is where I give you a quick tip that you can enact today that can make a huge game-changing shift in your classroom. And this quick tip is simple, and it is proactive parent communication. Because some of the times, if we can be honest, come on now, we can be honest, at this point of the year, you know, it's sometimes we're reactive when it comes to parent communication. At the beginning of the year, we send out all about me, I'm the new teacher, so great to see you, I'm so excited to be teaching your student around progress report time. We give them information, but are we consistent throughout the year with proactive, positive parent communication? Maybe and maybe not. One of the reasons why we may not be is because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of energy, right? Maybe it's not easy to positively to stay on that. I don't have the time to consistently email all my parents every night. I can't call all my students' parents every night. At my middle school, I have 136 students, right? So maybe we're looking at this and we're saying the reason why I don't proactively communicate is because it takes so much time. Well, I can give you some time-saving tips and strategies. Have you incorporated a newsletter inside of your classroom? A newsletter, I have a newsletter where I release every week, New Teacher Big Impact. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll see things like my strategies of the week, you'll see New Teacher Quick Tips of the week, you'll see my current thoughts, you'll see some of my favorite things, you'll see what's coming up. Like, I just give you a newsletter of all things going on inside the Pursuit of Excellence, about what impact course is just released. You see all these things inside of the newsletter, right? For your proactive parent communication, you can do something very similar where you send a newsletter or you send some sort of parent communication that's letting them know what's going on in class and what to look out for. One of the reasons why this is helpful, and I'll give you a little bit of an insight as well, even if you're thinking parents not reading this, even if you're thinking nobody cares about this, even if parents don't read every word, because I'll be honest, that my daughter is in kindergarten, her teacher does an awesome job of sending a newsletter. I don't read every single word, but when I see the newsletter, I scroll through it enough to have a gist of what's going on. Okay, cool, we're working on blending these CVC words. Okay, cool, awesome. We got pumpkin patch coming up. Cool, I'm just looking through these things just to be abreast of what's going on. The teachers that don't send any communication, as an administrator, those are the teachers we get a lot of complaints about. The teachers that the parents will say, I never hear from this teacher. I don't know what's going on in class. I ask my students what they're doing. And what do you think the students will say? Nothing. No, we don't do anything in that class, right? And meanwhile, the teachers, doing the very best, doing an awesome job or doing a great job or doing so much stuff. And the kids go home like, I don't know what I learned today, right? But if the teacher was sending proactive parent communication to let them know this is what's going on, this is what to look out for, then it would be helpful. And it's not necessarily something that needs to take a whole lot of time. There are AI tools, there are different resources that you can use, that you can utilize to help create your newsletter for you. I utilize a resource that, man, I just speak to the computer like I'm speaking to you right now. ChatGPT is one of them, but that's not even the only one. But I'm speaking to the computer like I speak to you right now, and turn my thoughts into text, and then just click create a newsletter, and it creates a teacher newsletter for me. Of course, I'll read over it, change a couple of words, make it sound like myself. But when I say that the newsletter takes me no more than 7 minutes, the newsletter takes me no more than 7 minutes, and everything I need to say is in there. The one I use is called Brisk Teaching, right? Which is an awesome, phenomenal tool, but there are so many others as well. So keep that in mind. Use one that suits your fancy. That being said, make sure that, the new teacher quick tip of the week is that we are sending proactive parent communication. It will assist because, again, parents and teachers are aligned, they're bought in, we're on the same page as it relates to a lot of things. So you will get a lot less parent complaints when you have proactive parent communication. I'll just put it like that. Not that it's gonna eradicate it, not that it's gonna eliminate it. And I will also say that there is also a piece of covering yourself, right? If you send something in a newsletter and a parent comes back, I didn't know that such and such and such was happening, you can always refer to, we do send a weekly newsletter, and on last week's newsletter, we let you know that Halloween costumes were not allowed at school, right? So whatever it is, a newsletter is a great way to make sure that you are proactively communicating with parents so that they feel involved and engaged in the classroom. And when they feel involved and engaged in the classroom, they will work together with you to support students as well. So that is a great way to reach a whole bunch of parents at once without having to individually reach out to every student's parent one by one. But again, you reserve the right to do that if needed as well. If you want to reach out one by one via email, Parent Square, text message, whatever it is. But if you're like, that's way too much, at minimum, to have a newsletter, okay? At minimum, have a newsletter. Because in doing so, not only will you be able to build relationships with students' parents, but because you have a good relationship with the parents, you also build a relationship with students, which does actually lead to our teacher lounge question. And a teacher lounge question is asking about how are you becoming a teacher that students like, but also becoming a teacher that students listen to. I'll answer that question right after this. Question for you, what are you doing on Tuesday night? The answer could be learning the game-changing formula to take control of your career without waiting on administration, without feeling unsupported, and without spending a whole lot of money. You can join us for our free workshop where we are going to unpack the 3D teacher success formula that's going to teach you the one thing that you have to do to take control of your career and become the teacher you've always wanted to be and make the impact you've always wanted to make. It's right inside of your control. All you have to do is click the link in the description below to register for the free workshop, newteacherbigimpact.com/workshop, and I'll see you on Tuesday night. Come on into the Teachers Lounge, and this is a supportive Teachers Lounge, one where we ask questions and we get answers and we talk to other people about it and we talk about the great things students are doing and ask honest questions about how we can improve becoming a better teacher and making the impact we've always wanted to make, just like the impact community where you can do all of those things, asking all those questions. Be with like-minded people who just want to do what's best for students, not like those toxic teaching lounges that just complain about students and talk about how bad they're doing, and that's not what we do here. But in this teachers lounge, we support one another, and we're going to answer a question. If you have a question for the teachers lounge, the only thing you have to do is be a member of Impact and submit your question, and I'll answer it right here on the podcast for you and anybody else who had a similar question. And this question is, how do I effectively manage classroom behavior while still building positive relationships with students? I get it. I remember being a new teacher and wanted to come in, and I know from school that sometimes the cool teachers are the teachers that get walked over. Sometimes the cool teachers are the ones that you don't really have to listen to, right? The cool teachers, they're cool, but when they want to get stern, you're like, man, stop playing Ms. Williams, right? And I struggled with that early on, especially being a young teacher. I wanted to be cool. I wanted students to like me, but I also wanted the classroom to be managed, and it wasn't working like that. Students were not taking me seriously, if you would. So I understand the question. And again, I'll read it. How are you going to know? Wait, no, that wasn't the question. How do I effectively manage classroom behavior while still building positive relationships? And my answer, what I had to learn, is that you effectively manage classroom behavior by building strong, positive relationships. And that does maybe sound counterintuitive, but watch this. When you build strong relationships with students, that gives you the license to be more structured with the students. I'll give you a couple examples, but some of the times we think that because we don't want them to get mad at us, I'm gonna be honest. Here we go. Sometimes we don't want them to get mad at us. We don't want them to get upset. We don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to be sad. So we don't put them in situations, or we're not as firm with them as we could be. You can nod along silently if I'm talking about you. Sometimes we're not as firm with them as we could be because we just want to be nice. Like, we want them to like us. Like, we want to keep that relationship, and we feel as if we put too many parameters around them, if we structure them too tightly, if we contain them, that they'll no longer like us, right? I see this not only with students, sometimes I see this with parents as well. I see this with parents with their kids. Like, no, I don't want to discipline my child. And I'm not even talking about beat. I mean, like, there's like, I don't want to discipline my child. I don't want to put them in timeout. I don't want to take their tablet away. I don't want to do that because I don't want to see them upset. I don't want to see them mad. I don't want to see them crying, right? And sometimes the same thing happens with the students. And what happens in both situations is that children of those parents and students of those teachers, they'll like you, right? But they won't listen to you, right? They will do kind of their own thing because they don't see consequences for their behaviors. Let me put it like this. As long as you promise not to judge me, I will tell you this story about my last Mother's Day with my wife and my daughter. My daughter and I went to the store. I had already got my wife her Mother's Day gifts, and my daughter made something at school for her, and my son made something at school. And we were in the store. We were just shopping for it was a regular grocery store. I was just getting some groceries. Or I don't know what I was getting, but I was in the grocery store. And my daughter saw all of the Mother's Day gifts and balloons inside of the store, and she was like, can we get a gift for Mom? Again, I already got her something, so I was like, sure, why not? So she sees this huge balloon, and she was like, can we get this for Mom? Y'all, this was the biggest balloon I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was huge. It was like pink. It said Mom. It was like float. And I looked at it. It was $21.99. I was like, I had already got Mom a gift. Like, not that she's not worth. That's why I said don't tell her that she's actually like 20 feet away in the kitchen. I said, don't tell her. Not that she's not worth a $21.99 balloon. I'd already spent a couple $100 on some other stuff, right? And I was like, I'm like, baby girl, I don't know if we need this balloon for Mom. And she's like, what about this one? She beats to the second biggest balloon I've ever seen in my life. This one was $19.99. I was like, okay. I look around and I look down this aisle. And down the aisle I'm looking, there are a lot of small balloons. Not tiny, but smaller, right? I was like, oh, come over here. So I took her down this aisle and I said, you can pick Mom any balloon you want, in this aisle. Any balloon you want in this aisle. She went down the aisle, she's looking, and she finds one that she likes, and she says, Dad, what about this? I looked at it, looked at the price tag, it was $4.99. I said, baby, let's get this balloon for your mom. All right, we go get the balloon and check out, we take it home. So, still a nice balloon. But the reason why I'm saying that is because when she had the freedom of the whole entire store to choose, she was choosing something that I wasn't willing to purchase. She was choosing something that I didn't agree with. She was choosing something that wasn't aligned with my expectations. I'm going somewhere, watch this. But once I put her in the specific aisle where there were many different options, but options that I already knew aligned with the parameters that I already set in place or with my expectations, she had the freedom to choose anything she wanted inside of that aisle. How does that relate to us and students in the classroom? Sometimes we think that if we are confining them, what we're doing is we're hurting them, we're stifling them. But what actually happens is when we are not firm with them, when we're not strict with them, when we're not putting parameters around them, we're giving them freedom to choose from the whole entire store. And oftentimes they're gonna choose something that is not aligned with our expectations. But when we set the expectations and parameters, we actually give them the freedom to do whatever it is that they want to do while also being safe and being in alignment with our expectations. So I want to shift your mindset in thinking that, man, if I'm too firm with these students, if I'm too strict with these students, if I'm too hard on these students, I'm actually going to push them away. When in reality, when you set those parameters, you're giving them the freedom to be themselves just within safe, confined parameters. And we both walk away with the thing that we wanted. And it's the same thing for students in your classroom. My daughter loved that experience with us. Your students are still going to love you and still appreciate you and still support the vision that you have for the classroom when they're in a confined parameters of these are what the expectations are. Okay, so that story actually took a little bit longer than I wanted it to take, but I hope it was helpful for you. I was gonna give you some more student examples, but I'll just give you one. Like even last week, this one student, we have a pretty good relationship, but she did something that she wasn't supposed to do. She called another student a name that was not nice, so I had to go pull her out of class and talk to her. And I was actually, man, I'm 10 years into the game, and I was even myself, I was nervous about having this conversation because I was like, man, I don't want to turn her off. Like I don't want to turn her away from me being her safe person. But I went to her and I spoke to her and I told her about the situation, how it made the other student feel and why she shouldn't have done that, why she didn't appreciate it. And at the end of the conversation, she was like, I get it, Mr. Williams, you're right. Like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. That was silly of me. Like, you got it. And then she was like, but thank you for pulling me out of class because I was, that class was boring. I was like, that was not the purpose of this conversation. But it was cool. Like, we ended up having a talking conversation. And then again, she came back to my room the next day, not like nothing had ever happened. But so, I'm bringing that up because sometimes we feel like if we have to have these hard conversations, if we have to get on a student, if we have to call their parent, if we have to hold them accountable, we have to give them a consequence, that is going to tarnish the relationship forever. And in actuality, they actually see you with more respect because they say, she was like, man, I can see how my words offended that person. And in her brain, she's probably like, wow, he's looking out not just for me, but for other students. I actually really respect him even more for that. Right? It didn't tarnish our relationship. I actually honestly truly believe that it made it a little bit stronger. So build strong relationships, but also remain firm with your students. You can be a student that students like, and also, like you can be a teacher that students like, and also be a teacher that students listen to. All right, and that's going to lead us to our exit ticket of the day. Would not be an effective lesson if we did not end with an exit ticket that assessed whether or not you understood the objective. And this exit ticket for you to respond to here in the comment section is, how are you going to know when it's time for you to introduce the next objective? How are you going to know? I told you that the parameters, that it needs to be fingertip. Now you go ahead and define that. What is going to be your fingertip? How are you going to know when students have mastered enough of this objective to be able to move on to the next one? Again, it doesn't have to be 100%. It has to be fingertip. How are you going to determine if something is within their fingertip reach? Let us know in the comment section. I'm super interested and we want to hold you accountable. So put down how you're going to know so that you can put it in place. And remember, I believe that you can do better than you're currently doing. I know nothing about your class. I'm not saying that you're doing a bad job, but even I believe that everybody can do a little bit better, but it just happens one move at a time. I believe that you can do one shift, make one adjustment, make a couple of changes that are gonna drastically improve the way you show up in the classroom, and this could be one of them. Determining a firm factor of what it's going to take for you to decide we're moving on to the next lesson. And actually next week, we're going to talk about pacing so that we can determine how to pace throughout the year so that if you have to make decisions like, no, we need to stay in this lesson a little bit longer or we're ready to move on to the next lesson, that we don't get to the end of the year and realize that we didn't teach all of the standards. We're gonna talk about pacing in the next episode. So for now, I appreciate you being here today. Remember, share this episode with somebody. Today, share this episode with someone who has not been chronically absent in your life, right? Somebody who's been there for you, who's been there from the beginning, somebody who loves and appreciates you and always shows up for you. Share this episode with them. Let them know that you love them right back. And I hope that you are receiving massive value from the lessons, and I hope you appreciate the segments and the way that it's broken down. Our whole goal is to make sure that you become the teacher you've always wanted to be and make the impact you've always wanted to make. I'll see you in the next episode.